Okay, part 3. So what I was saying was, then after I had decided to not pursue medical stuff for, several reasons, and I was trusting God that He was going to heal me and take care of me. And actually, at this point, ironically, I knew very little. Looking back, I can say this. I knew very little about what was wrong in my body. I had a couple of specific diagnoses and then just knew some other things that weren't working right, but didn't have much of a handle on. That was another problem with the whole medical establishment for me, was they just couldn't figure out what was wrong, and were still drugging me, wanting to drug me to fix things, and especially insomnia. I was on prescription sleeping pills for about a year, and that is just not a long-term solution. If you're not sleeping, there's a problem. Your body is supposed to sleep, and so I needed and wanted real healing and real answers, and I was trusting God for that. And a lot of things happened along the way, emotionally and spiritually, but I'm focusing right now on my actual physical journey for physical health. And so the next big thing that happened was my stepdad, Bruce, told me about a guy he knew named Dr. Patrick Flynn, and he at the time told me that, this is how the reason I went to see him was because he specializes in female hormones, and obviously that was very obviously a problem for me, and was part of some of the specific diagnoses I had. So I went to see him. Oh, but he specializes in female hormones, but he is natural. He does things naturally. So he treats things with, I don't know all the technical terms, so if anybody sees this and and gets upset because I'm not using the right terms, forgive me. I do know a lot of things, but I'm not always necessarily scientifically accurate with my words. So my understanding of what he uses are like pharmaceutical grade herbs and natural remedies. It's not stuff you can just go to the natural food store and buy it yourself. There's a lot of stuff you can just buy yourself, but not the stuff that he uses. It's good stuff that nourishes your body, heals your body. And I don't know if at the time he was a functional medicine practitioner, but since I started to see him, I saw him from 2009 to 2011. He treated me for various things. One of the main things was he ended up finding I had high levels of lead and mercury, so he treated me for the heavy metal poisoning. And I went through, it's called chelation. I went through chelation with him, and then I stopped, not because I didn't like him, not because I was dissatisfied with the care. It was just that it was expensive. And again, that's just part of all of this. Real wellness costs money, unfortunately. So if you're well right now, I definitely encourage you. And I mean this with everything in me. Do everything that you can to stay well. I'm not talking about do the things that the mainstream world does. I'm saying take the time and invest the energy to learn about real healthcare and to keep the health that you have, because when you lose it, oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. You need money to get well, and you can't get well till you get the money to pay for the services you need to get well. And it's nightmare doesn't begin to describe what it is. And I know there are so many people who have had it so much more difficult, have had a much more difficult time than I have had, and it has been more than a nightmare for me. So anyway, I stopped seeing him just because I wanted to pay the debt that had accumulated from going through the chelation. I had known that the chelation was really important, but and so I couldn't not do it, but I didn't have the money, so I accrued debt, and I had wanted to pay it off before we continued to move forward. I'm going into a lot of back detail that I didn't mean to go into, so I apologize. But for anyone else who's watching this, I don't apologize to myself when I watch this again. But if I ever watch it again. But so I saw him from 2009 to 2011, and then from 2013, because then in 2011 I was actually, you know, he had got me to the point where I was sleeping pretty well. I think it still probably wasn't what it should be, but it was enough. Like, I was sleeping enough that I could function. And so I just thought if I maintained that I would be okay until I could afford to see him some more. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way. Didn't work out. I stopped sleeping again, and I was trying to tough it out until I paid those debts off and could afford to see him without having to pile on the debt. But by 2013, I just couldn't take it anymore. Sleep deprivation is horrible, especially long term. So anyway, I went back to see him. July 2013, I started seeing him again, and at first we were really successful with... Oh, and what I was saying then was between 2011 and 2013, I don't know if he became a functional medicine practitioner or if he already was, and I just didn't know that term before. But when I went back to see him again, things were... He certainly was great before, when my first period of time of seeing him. But when I went back, his practice had exploded, and seemed to me anyway, you know, just his name was everywhere. People all over knew him. He started overseeing other clinics. The therapies and the things he did were all, there was so much more doctors, just more everything. Just really good stuff. It's called the Wellness Way if you're a Wisconsin native, or if you're living there now anyway. There's a clinic in Green Bay, there's a clinic in Appleton, there's one in Milwaukee, and then he actually has some in different states. I think he told me last year he was opening one in Texas, and I forget which city, and he's got one in Tampa, I think. Anyway, he doesn't work out of those other clinics. He works out of Green Bay, but he oversees those other clinics. So anyway, 2013, started seeing again. My body responded really well the first 6 weeks, and then just stalled, and then eventually, now this is the part where actually my spiritual healing begins to play a really giant role in my physical pursuit of healing. I'm not going to go into that now just because it's an entirely different story. But other than to say, I felt like the Lord really told me he had, you know, I mean, there were perhaps other times that he told me he had plans for my healing journey, and that I was going to get well. And I don't know. I don't know if I received it. I don't know if I ever heard it. But I specifically asked to know, and I had felt like he was showing me several times, especially actually through some very specific things that Patrick said. Again, I'm not going to go into all that. Anyway, in this spring, 2014, I felt like the Lord told me that I needed to ask to do a Lyme disease test. And so we did it. And actually, the test that they do, there's so many different tests that different schools of thought will use. I didn't get the typical medical Lyme disease test. A lot of times that one won't even detect it till it's really far along. So what Patrick tested for were some immune markers, one of them being C4A. My C4A level was almost 7,500, which is really high. I don't know the scale, but I know that 7,500 is really high. You want it to be at 0, and 7,500 is really high. So that was what indicated that I very likely have Lyme disease. Although it's not a guarantee that that's what is aggravating my system. But it doesn't matter. That I'll get to that more later. Anyway, what I was saying was, I think at the beginning of this section, now I'm already at the end of part 3. Let me go to part 4 and tell you what I was saying.